We hear a lot about addicts and addiction from the news, books, TV, radio, and the internet. But who is an addict? What is addiction? Where did it come from? And how did it get to be this way? A lot of people say drugs cause addiction. They say things like, "Don't even try it once, you'll get hooked forever." As if drugs can have power over people. But where did these ideas come from? In the 1700s, gin became very popular in cities in England, so popular that people started getting worried. This became known as the gin craze. People thought that gin was breaking apart families, that mothers would stop taking care of children, fathers would never come home, everyone would be drunk all the time, and in the end, gin would rip the social fabric to shreds. They started passing laws to regulate, control, and eventually outlawed gin consumption. One magistrate called gin the principal cause of all the vice and debauchery committed among the inferior sort of people. Actually, it was a lot like how we talk about substances like heroin and crack today. The media, politicians, religious leaders, teachers, police officers, parents, even some scholars decry substances like crack and heroin as all-powerful drugs ripping apart families, community, and society. But what's really going on here? Are these substances really the dangerous, powerful demons we've been told they are? As is clear to us today, gin was not in fact the cause of all social ails of the 18th century in England. While gin does have an often pleasurable biochemical effect on humans, and is toxic in large quantities, and is the subject of some people's addictions, for the vast majority of people who consume it, gin doesn't cause overwhelming problems. Eventually, gin was re-legalized, and as we all know now, it didn't destroy society. But the myth of the demon drug didn't end with gin. In fact, it's just gotten bigger and nastier and more deadly as more substances have been piled into the myth. It's not just gin, it's opium, cocaine, marijuana, moonshine, and absinthe, morphine, heroin, and more recently cigarettes and crack. Now the demon drug myth is a terrifying beast, consuming helpless, hopeless, worthless junkies and addicts everywhere. And science seems to back up this idea that particular substances have the power to take over and control people. Starting in the 1960s, numerous experiments were performed on lab animals that demonstrated that they would continue to self-inject morphine and other opiates repeatedly, even to the detriment of their health. For many, this was proof of the demon drug myth. But in the 1970s, Bruce Alexander, the author of The Globalization of Addiction, did a similar experiment with rats. Alexander noticed that in most of those other experiments, the rats, who are highly social animals like humans, were housed in particularly abnormal conditions, in isolated cages. He wondered what would happen if rats were given access to similar substances in a more natural setting. He constructed a super cage that he called Rat Park, where rats could live their normal social lives in an environment more similar to their natural habitat. He found that rats isolated in cages consumed up to 20 times more morphine than rats living in Rat Park. Even when they were previously force-fed morphine, or when the morphine was spiked with the irresistible taste of sugar, the rats living in Rat Park consumed much less morphine than isolated rats, and did not become addicted. So, while the demon drug myth is a compelling story, and it makes great headlines, under close scrutiny, it just doesn't hold up. There is no boogeyman, at least in the form of a substance. So, if demon drugs don't cause addiction, what does? According to Alexander, addiction is an adaptive response to sustained dislocation. To understand what he means, we have to look to the prominent 20th century social theorists Erik Erikson and Karl Polanyi. In Erikson's work on developmental psychology, he posits that psychosocial integration is key to human functioning. To describe this state of well-being, we also use words like wholeness, healthy personality, community, belonging, social cohesion, and culture. In Polanyi's research on the social effects of capitalism in the 19th century, he used the term dislocation to describe how free markets shaped communities that allow individuals to have lots of autonomy at the cost of social belonging, thus preventing people from developing psychosocial integration. Bruce Alexander's discovery was that sustained dislocation, whether as a result of free market society or otherwise, is the primary factor in the rampant spread of addiction. People who become addicted, rather than being the victims of powerful demon drugs, are actually adapting to the experience of sustained dislocation. Imagine a fox with its leg caught in a trap. The adaptive solution for the fox is to gnaw off its leg to escape from the trap and survive. But if you're watching the fox, and you can't see the trap, the behavior would not seem to be adaptive at all. In fact, the fox would even seem crazed or possessed. This is how it is with addiction. Addicted people are responding to sustained dislocation in a similar way that the fox responds to the trap, but with people the trap is not obvious to either the addict or the society. In part 2, we'll look for the trap and try to track down the hunters who set it.